Have you ever wondered why your grandmother's garden always looked like a lush jungle, even though she never bought those expensive neon blue chemical fertilizers from the big box stores? What if I told you that you are currently wasting $50 a month on synthetic plant food, when the ultimate growth secret costs literally 10 cents? Today, we are completely changing the way you look at gardening. I am going to share a bizarre, incredibly cheap trick that uses just one simple spoonful of an everyday pantry item to make your vegetables grow absolutely crazy. Prepare to throw away your chemical sprays, because this secret contradicts everything the big gardening corporations want you to believe. Are you ready to see your tomato plants double in size? Let me know in the comments right now if you currently use chemicals or if you try to stay entirely organic. Let us dive in. Before we reveal the magic ingredient, we need to understand a brief history of how we feed our gardens. For thousands of years, farmers relied strictly on nature. They used compost, animal manure, and natural decay to build rich, dark soil. But in the middle of the 20th century, synthetic fertilizers were invented. These chemical compounds promised instant, massive growth. Suddenly, everyone abandoned the old natural ways and started pouring synthetic nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium onto their vegetable beds. It seemed like a miracle at first. However, decades later, we are seeing the massive hidden costs. Our soil is becoming dead and compacted. Plants are becoming weaker and more prone to disease. We forgot the ancient wisdom that healthy plants come from living soil, not from a sterile chemical factory. Today, we are going back to basics with a scientifically proven, hyper-effective organic method that costs almost nothing. Let us dive right into the heart of the matter by looking at the grand illusion of chemical fertilizers. For decades, big companies have pushed the myth that you absolutely need expensive, brightly coloured powders to get a decent garden harvest. They want you to believe that without their synthetic plant food, your tomatoes will stay tiny and your cucumbers will simply wither away. But let me tell you, this is completely false. Think of a lush, ancient forest. Nobody is out there spraying synthetic nitrogen on the giant trees or the wild berry bushes, right? Nature has its own perfect system for feeding plants, and it relies on a rich, living web of soil microbes. When you pour chemical fertilizers onto your garden bed, you are essentially giving your plants the equivalent of a massive junk food binge. Sure, they might shoot up quickly at first, and you might feel proud of those bright green leaves. But underneath the surface, a slow disaster is brewing. Those harsh salts in the synthetic fertilizers actively burn the delicate roots of your vegetables. Even worse, they wipe out the beneficial bacteria that naturally aerate your soil. It is exactly like trying to survive on sugary energy drinks. You get a quick burst of energy, but eventually your overall health crashes. By breaking free from this chemical dependency, you are taking the first crucial step toward a truly healthy garden. We really need to understand what happens to your garden soil when you constantly use these synthetic products. Let us debunk a very common myth right now. Many beginner gardeners believe that dirt is just dead, empty material meant to simply hold plant roots in place. But in reality, healthy soil is a living, breathing ecosystem filled with billions of microscopic helpers. Think of your garden soil like a bustling, microscopic underground city. The beneficial bacteria and friendly fungi are the dedicated factory workers who break down organic matter and deliver pure nutrients directly to your plant roots. When chemical salts flood this delicate system, it is like a toxic flood, washing away all the hard workers. Over time, your soil becomes incredibly hard, compacted, and completely lifeless. It turns into a powdery grey dust that cannot hold moisture during a hot summer day. I have seen community gardens where the dirt is so packed and dead from heavy chemical use that rainwater just runs right off the top, completely ignoring the thirsty roots below. By switching to our 10-cent natural trick, you are actively rebuilding that underground city. You are bringing the soil back to life, creating a spongy, moisture-rich environment where earthworms actually want to live. This means you will spend far less time watering your plants. So, What is this incredible 10-cent secret that will replace your expensive chemical fertilizers? It is time for the big reveal. The magic ingredient is ordinary, active dry yeast. Yes, you heard me correctly. The exact same simple baking yeast you use in the kitchen to make a loaf of bread rise is the ultimate secret weapon for your vegetable garden. It sounds almost too simple to be true, which is why big fertilizer companies hope you never find out about it. When you think about it, the concept makes perfect logical sense. Yeast is a single-celled, living microorganism. When you add it to your bread dough, it consumes sugars, releases carbon dioxide, and expands the dough massively. When you introduce this exact same living organism to your garden soil, a similar explosion of biological activity occurs. Imagine taking a flat, dense piece of dough and watching it swell up into a huge, fluffy loaf of bread. That exact same principle of rapid, vibrant expansion is what is going to happen to the root systems of your vegetable plants. Active dry yeast is packed with essential proteins, valuable trace minerals, and a massive dose of vitamin B. These are all critical elements that young vegetable plants desperately crave for fast, rigorous growth. Now that you know the secret ingredient is ordinary baking yeast, let us explore exactly how it works its magic hidden under the dirt. The yeast does not just magically stretch the plant leaves. Instead, it works as a powerful catalyst for the entire soil food web. When you pour our special yeast mixture into the dirt, the yeast immediately goes to work communicating with the existing soil microbes. It acts like a massive feast for the microscopic organisms that already live in your garden beds. Let us use a real-world example to picture this. Imagine a construction site where the workers are tired, hungry, and moving very slowly. Suddenly, a food truck rolls up and hands out free, highly nutritious meals to everyone. Suddenly, the workers have explosive energy and build the house twice as fast. The yeast is that food truck for your soil microbes. As the yeast breaks down, it releases a highly concentrated dose of natural amino acids and plant hormones directly into the root zone. These hormones naturally stimulate the plant to grow secondary roots. The more roots your plant has, the more water and nutrients it can absorb from the surrounding earth. It is a brilliant self-sustaining cycle of growth that completely eliminates the need for harsh, synthetic root stimulators. Of course, you cannot just sprinkle dry yeast powder on top of your garden soil and expect a miracle to happen. The yeast is currently dormant, which means it is in a deep sleep. To unlock its incredible fertilizing power, we have to wake it up properly. This is where our second inexpensive pantry ingredient comes into play. We need ordinary white or brown sugar. Let us completely shatter another silly myth right now. Many people think adding sugar to soil will simply attract millions of aggressive ants to your garden. But when mixed correctly with yeast and warm water, the sugar is entirely consumed by the yeast, long before an ant ever smells it. The sugar acts as the initial energy source, the starter fuel that wakes the yeast from its long slumber. Think of it like a hibernating brown bear waking up in the early spring. That bear is sluggish and slow until it finds a giant honeycomb full of sweet honey. Once it eats that sugar, it has the energy to start roaming the forest. In our recipe, the warm water provides the comfortable environment and the sugar provides the instant calories. Within minutes of mixing them together, you will see a thick, bubbly foam start to form on the surface of the water. That bubbly foam is the visual proof that your 10-cent biological fertilizer is alive, active, and ready to work. Let us walk through the exact, step-by-step recipe to create this powerful organic fertilizer right in your own kitchen. Precision is somewhat important here, but it is incredibly easy to follow. First, you need a clean glass jar or a small plastic bucket. Pour in exactly 1 quart of warm water. The water temperature is absolutely crucial. It should be pleasantly warm to the touch, like comfortable bath water. If the water is too hot, it will instantly kill the yeast cells, and if it is freezing cold, the yeast will stay asleep. Next, add exactly 1 tablespoon of ordinary dry active yeast and 1 tablespoon of sugar. Stir the mixture gently with a wooden spoon until the sugar granules are completely dissolved. Now just walk away and let the container sit on your kitchen counter for about 3 hours. You are allowing the fermentation process to begin. This is exactly like following a simple soup recipe. You have to let the ingredients simmer and combine to get the best flavour. After 3 hours, the mixture will smell slightly sour, just like fresh bread dough. Now here is the most important step. You cannot pour this concentrated liquid directly onto your plants. You must dilute it. Take your 1 quart of fermented yeast mixture and mix it into 2.5 gallons of room temperature water. Your 10-cent magic potion is now completely ready to use. Before we rush out to the garden to pour this mixture everywhere, we need to address a dangerous mindset that plagues many enthusiastic beginners. We need to talk about the myth that more is always better. It is human nature to think that if 1 spoonful of yeast makes plants grow well, then a whole cup of yeast will turn them into giant beanstalks overnight. Please do not do this. Let me give you a very clear illustration. Imagine you are caring for a delicate indoor houseplant. It needs a little bit of water twice a week to thrive. If you decide to dump a 10-gallon bucket of water on it all at once, you will simply drown the roots and kill the plant. The exact same logic applies to our organic yeast fertilizer. The yeast mixture is incredibly biologically active and rich in nitrogen compounds. If you make the solution too strong, or if you apply it without diluting it in the 2.5 gallons of water, you will overwhelm the soil ecosystem. You can actually cause a sudden bacterial bloom that steals oxygen away from the plant roots. A mild, perfectly diluted solution provides a steady, manageable stream of nutrition. Remember, we are trying to gently mimic nature, not force-feed our fragile vegetable plants. Stick strictly to the recipe I just gave you, and your garden will reward you with massive, healthy growth. Now let us discuss the absolute best application method for your new homemade fertilizer. How exactly should you deliver this magic liquid to your hungry vegetables? The answer is a technique called root drenching. You want to pour the diluted yeast mixture directly onto the soil at the very base of the main stem. Do not spray this mixture onto the green leaves of the plant. Let us break down why this is so important. Think about how you drink a glass of water. You put it in your mouth, not pour it over your hair. Plants drink primarily through their complex underground root systems. Furthermore, leaving a sugary yeast residue on the surface of wet leaves can actually invite unwanted fungal spores from the wind to stick to your plant. By pouring the mixture slowly and directly into the dirt around the base, you ensure that 100% of the beneficial yeast and vitamins soak straight down into the root zone where they are desperately needed. Use a simple watering can with the shower nozzle removed. Slowly pour about 1 quart of the diluted mixture around the base of each mature vegetable plant. Let the dark soil soak it up completely like a dry sponge. You will notice the earth darkening and settling as the living liquid works its way deep down into the garden bed. Timing is everything when it comes to gardening, and applying your fresh yeast fertilizer is no exception. You cannot just run out in the middle of a blazing hot afternoon and start pouring liquids on your plants. The best time of day to apply this 10-cent trick is either early in the morning before the sun gets hot, or late in the evening as the sun is going down. Let us use a relatable example to explain why. Imagine walking completely barefoot across an asphalt parking lot at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the middle of July. It is scorching, stressful, and physically damaging. Your plants feel that exact same intense stress during the heat of the day. Their pores are closed, and they are conserving water just to survive the intense sun. If you pour fertilizer into the hot, baking soil, the rapid evaporation can cause the nutrients to crystallize and lightly burn the surface roots. However, if you water early in the morning, it is like giving your plant a cool, refreshing cup of coffee right as it wakes up. The soil is cool, the roots are relaxed, and they have plenty of time to slowly drink up all the valuable vitamins and amino acids before the harsh afternoon sun arrives. Evening applications are equally wonderful, giving the yeast the entire cool night to multiply and enrich the soil ecosystem in peace. Let us talk about specific vegetables and how they react to this incredible organic boost. We will start with the absolute king of the backyard garden, the tomato plant. Tomatoes are notoriously heavy feeders. They demand massive amounts of energy to produce those heavy, juicy red fruits. A very common myth is that you need special, high-calcium chemical drops just for tomatoes. While calcium is important, a strong, massive root system is the true secret to preventing bottom rot and dropping flowers. When you feed a tomato plant with our yeast mixture, the results are almost unbelievable. The vitamin B complex in the yeast triggers rapid cellular division in the tomato stems. I have seen tomato plants grow stalks as thick as a broomstick just weeks after their first yeast application. The branches become incredibly sturdy. Picture a young fruit tree heavily loaded with green apples. If the branches are weak, they snap. The yeast treatment builds a structural foundation so strong that your tomato branches can easily support clusters of huge, heavy heirloom tomatoes without bending or breaking. You will notice the leaves turning a deep, rich, vibrant emerald green, which is a clear indicator that the plant is happily absorbing maximum nutrition from the living soil. Another group of garden vegetables that absolutely go crazy for this 10-cent trick are the vining plants. I am talking about cucumbers, zucchini, squash, and pumpkins. These plants have a naturally aggressive growth habit, but they often burn out halfway through the summer and stop producing fruit. Let us paint a picture of what happens when you introduce yeast to a cucumber patch. Imagine a thick, dense jungle vine expanding relentlessly across a forest canopy, completely taking over a trellis almost overnight. That is the kind of explosive, creeping growth you will witness. Cucumbers are almost entirely made of water, which means they need an incredibly efficient root system to pump moisture from the ground up into the hanging fruits. The yeast mixture supercharges the fine, hairy feeder roots of the cucumber vine. Within just 5 to 7 days of pouring the yeast drench around the base, you will see a massive burst of bright yellow flowers appearing along the vine. More flowers naturally equal more cucumbers. Even better, the increased biological activity in the soil helps the zucchini and squash plants fight off the terrible powdery mildew that usually attacks their broad leaves late in the season. You will harvest crisp, perfectly formed cucumbers all the way until the first frost. Do not think this magic is only for towering tomato vines and sprawling cucumbers. Root vegetables hidden under the dirt love this treatment just as much. Carrots, radishes, beets, and turnips benefit incredibly from the yeast fermentation process. There is a persistent myth that fertilizing root crops just gives you massive leafy tops and tiny stringy roots. That is only true if you use synthetic chemical nitrogen, which forces upward leaf growth. Our natural yeast trick works entirely differently. Let us use the famous analogy of an iceberg. What you see above the water is only 10% of the massive structure hidden below. When you apply the diluted yeast to a row of carrots, the amino acids specifically target the downward cellular expansion of the taproot. The yeast loosens the microscopic soil particles, creating a softer path for the root to push downward into the earth. Instead of pulling up short, twisted, woody carrots, you will easily slide massive, perfectly straight, incredibly sweet carrots out of the ground. The natural sugars that were broken down by the yeast are partially absorbed, giving your homegrown beets and radishes an intense, rich flavour that you simply cannot ever buy in a modern grocery store. The difference in taste is truly mind-blowing. We absolutely cannot forget about the leafy green vegetables. Lettuce, spinach, kale, and Swiss chard are the staple crops for early spring and late fall gardens. For these plants, the leaves themselves are the final harvest. When you use harsh chemical fertilizers on delicate lettuce, it often causes the leaves to become bitter and tough. The plant grows too fast and completely loses its tender texture. Imagine going to an expensive gourmet salad bar, only to find the greens taste like tough, bitter cardboard. That is chemical farming. By switching to the gentle biological power of our yeast mixture, your leafy greens will thrive naturally. The yeast provides a slow, steady release of organic nitrogen as the microbes break it down. This results in wide, beautifully tender spinach leaves and crisp, sweet lettuce heads. Because the yeast helps retain moisture deep in the soil, your lettuce is far less likely to bolt or go to seed prematurely when the weather suddenly gets a little bit warm. You can literally harvest fresh, delicious salad greens for several weeks longer than your neighbours who are still relying on expensive synthetic blue powders. The gentle nature of this 10-cent fertilizer makes it absolutely perfect for delicate herbs like basil and cilantro as well. Now we need to discuss a very crucial aspect of this strategy. How frequently should you actually use this 10-cent trick? Consistency is key, but as we discussed earlier, we do not want to overwhelm the soil. The golden rule for the yeast fertilizer is to apply it exactly once every 2 weeks during the active growing season. Let us compare this to a healthy fitness routine. Imagine going to the gym. If you work out intensely for 10 hours on a Monday and then do absolutely nothing for a month, you will not get strong. You will just get injured. But if you do a balanced workout twice a week, every week, you build incredible lasting muscle. Your garden operates on the exact same biological rhythm. Applying the diluted yeast drench every 14 days provides a continuous, steady supply of fresh microbes and vitamins. It keeps the underground city of bacteria constantly fed and actively working. You should start this routine about 2 weeks after you plant your young seedlings in the main garden bed and continue it straight through the heavy fruiting phase in midsummer. Once the plants start naturally dying back in the late autumn, you can stop the applications and let the soil rest for the winter season. Beyond just getting massive tomatoes and giant cucumbers, we must talk about the profound environmental impact of making this switch. When you choose to stop buying chemical fertilizers, you are making a massive difference for your local ecosystem. Let me explain the terrifying reality of synthetic garden chemicals. When you water your garden after applying chemical salts, a large portion of those unabsorbed chemicals washes deep into the groundwater. It runs off your property, down the street, and directly into the local rivers and streams. This toxic runoff causes massive algae blooms that choke the life out of local waterways. Imagine a beautiful, clear, sparkling local river suddenly turning into a thick, green, foul-smelling swamp where fish cannot breathe. That is the true cost of chemical convenience. By using our simple 10-cent combination of yeast and sugar, you completely eliminate this dangerous runoff. The organic mixture is completely absorbed by the local soil web. It is 100% biodegradable and totally safe for the bees, the butterflies, and the earthworms in your backyard. You are not just saving money, you are actively protecting the natural wildlife in your neighborhood while simultaneously growing the biggest, healthiest vegetables on your block. Let us take a moment to shatter one of the most stubborn myths in the entire gardening community. The myth is that organic gardening is painfully slow, and that if you want fast, impressive results, you simply must use harsh chemicals. This is completely backward. While it is true that dumping raw, uncomposted leaves on your garden takes a year to break down, our active yeast method is a rapid release biological engine. Let us use the classic story of the tortoise and the hare to illustrate this. People think chemicals are the fast rabbit, and organic methods are the incredibly slow turtle. But using fermented yeast is like strapping a rocket booster straight onto the back of that turtle. Because the yeast has already fermented and broken down the sugars in your kitchen jar, the nutrients are immediately available to the plant roots the second you pour the liquid onto the soil. There is no waiting period. Within 48 hours of your very first application, you will noticeably see the leaves perking up and reaching toward the sun. The growth speed absolutely rivals and usually beats the expensive synthetic products. You get the incredible speed of a chemical blast, but with the long-lasting soil-building benefits of pure, natural organic gardening. One of the most surprising and wonderful side effects of this 10-cent yeast trick is how it dramatically increases your plant's natural disease resistance. When you rely on synthetic chemicals, you create weak, lazy plants. They do not have to work for their food, so their internal cellular walls become thin and incredibly fragile. When a summer storm brings fungal spores or nasty garden pests, These weak plants surrender almost immediately. Let us picture a medieval knight going into battle. A chemically fed plant is like a knight wearing armour made of thin tin foil. One strike and the armour crumples. But a plant fed with our living yeast mixture develops incredibly thick, robust cell walls. The yeast naturally stimulates the production of special plant proteins that act as an immune system booster. Your tomato and cucumber plants become like a knight wearing heavy, impenetrable steel armour. When early blight or powdery mildew tries to attack the leaves, the plant has the internal strength to naturally fight off the infection. I have personally seen garden beds where the chemically treated plants completely rotted away from fungal disease, while the yeast-treated plants standing right next to them remained perfectly healthy and green all summer long. There is a very important technical detail regarding the storage and preparation of this homemade fertilizer that beginners often mess up. You must make this yeast mixture fresh every single time you plan to use it. You cannot mix a giant 50-gallon barrel of it and leave it sitting in your hot garage for a month. Let me explain why with a very simple analogy. Think about pouring yourself a glass of crisp, sparkling soda. When you first open it, it is full of bubbles and life. But if you leave that glass sitting on the kitchen counter for 3 days, it becomes completely flat, stale, and totally useless. The exact same biological process happens with our yeast mixture. The yeast is a living organism that quickly consumes the sugar. Once the sugar is entirely gone, the yeast cells will start to die off, and the liquid will begin to smell incredibly awful, like rotten garbage. To get the explosive growth results we want, the yeast must be applied to the soil while it is still actively fermenting and alive. Simply keep the dry yeast packets and the dry sugar safely stored in your kitchen pantry, where they will last for years. Then, only mix the exact amount of water and ingredients you need for that specific day in the garden. How do you know if your vegetable garden is desperately crying out for this 10-cent nutrient boost? There are several clear, visual signs that your plants are starving and need immediate help. The most obvious sign is when the lower leaves of your tomato or cucumber plants start turning a pale, sickly yellow, while the veins remain slightly green. This is a classic symptom of nitrogen deficiency and poor soil biology. Another major warning sign is stunted growth. If your pepper plants have been sitting in the dirt for 3 weeks and have not grown a single new leaf, the soil ecosystem is completely stalled. Think of these signs exactly like the warning lights on your car dashboard. When the oil light flashes red, you do not just ignore it and keep driving until the engine explodes. You immediately pull over and add oil. When your plants show these yellowing leaves or refuse to grow, it is their biological dashboard flashing a massive red warning light. That is the exact moment you need to mix up a fresh batch of our warm yeast and sugar liquid. Within just a few days of a deep root drench, you will watch those pale yellow leaves transform back into a rich, healthy, dark green as the plant quickly absorbs the rush of amino acids. Let us quickly look at the big picture and calculate the true cost savings over an entire gardening season. This is where the magic of the 10-cent trick truly shines. If you walk into a large garden centre right now, a medium-sized jug of synthetic liquid fertilizer will easily cost you $25 to $30. If you have a decent-sized backyard garden, you will likely buy 2 or 3 of those jugs every single summer. That is almost $100 wasted on toxic chemicals that are slowly killing your soil. Now let us compare that to our simple pantry recipe. A large jar of active dry yeast costs maybe $5, and a bag of plain sugar costs $3. Because you only use 1 tablespoon at a time, that single $8 investment will literally yield dozens and dozens of gallons of premium, high-grade, organic fertilizer. It breaks down to roughly 10 cents per application. Imagine what you could do with that extra $90 every summer. You could buy beautiful new ceramic pots, invest in high-quality heirloom seeds, or simply put it in a vacation fund. You are getting far superior, explosive plant growth, completely restoring the health of your soil, and saving a massive amount of money all at the same time. It is the ultimate gardening victory. So, Let us look at the incredible journey we have taken today. We completely exposed the dark truth about expensive chemical fertilizers and how they secretly destroy the living ecosystem in your soil. More importantly, we revealed the ultimate 10-cent secret weapon hiding right in your kitchen pantry. By simply combining warm water, a little sugar, and active dry yeast, you can create a biological powerhouse that makes your tomatoes, cucumbers, and root vegetables grow absolutely crazy. You now understand how to wake the yeast up, how to perfectly dilute the mixture, and exactly when and how to apply it to the roots for maximum explosive growth. The days of wasting money on toxic blue powders are officially over. Your garden is about to become a lush, disease-resistant, organic paradise. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today and learning how to garden smarter, not harder. If this 10-cent trick blew your mind, please make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel so you never miss our future gardening secrets, and share this video with a friend who loves to grow food. Now, I want to hear from you. Which vegetable in your garden are you going to test this yeast magic on first? Drop your answer in the comments below and let us get growing.